February 1946. With much media hype and sensationalism, the U.S. unveils the Paragon Trooper in response to the German super soldier program. With a mission to hunt the Nachtjäger, the troopers restore much-needed morale in the force, even if their achievements are less significant than the press would have the public believe. A more modest tone is adopted by the British government and press regarding the first deployment of the Galahad armored infantry, which have an immediate effect on the Commonwealth forces' morale. Allied forces finally reach the Rhine and stand at the gates of Germany itself. As preparations for the final assault begin, a bitter air campaign is waged for air superiority. German jet fighters are unleashed in numbers thought impossible and inflict a heavy toll on Allied aircraft. For 2 months, the air war continues as weather permits, and although the Allies eventually consider themselves the victor, the losses suffered and the resurgence of the Luftwaffe will make future operations much more dangerous. April 1946. Operation Grenade is launched by the U.S. under General Patton in an attempt to force the Rhine in the south and strike up into the heartlands of Germany. After the largest artillery barrage of the war in the west thus far, U.S. troops attempt to lay bridges under fierce German resistance. Although a number of bridges are created, German counterattacks and commando raids behind the U.S. lines eventually stall and then end the operation. U.S. troops enter Germany, but they do not gain a foothold. The first appearance of the German heavy Panzermechs caused havoc in the media. An apparently lone Zeus Panzermech defending one end of the bridge held up an entire U.S. armored regiment for up to 12 hours. Talk of unbeatable German Panzermech spreads across the globe, despite the fact that the incident was a combination of luck, poor tactics, and ideal defensive terrain. May 1946. The U.S. reorganizing to the south, the British, under Montgomery, make their attempt to force the Rhine under Operation Redwood. Commandos and the SAS strike German command posts in the hours before the assault. Hundreds of boats and pontoons begin to cross the Rhine in the early hours of the 12th of May. German defenders, bereft of command, fight stoically but fail to coordinate across the breadth of the attack, and by the morning the British have footholds in several places on the German side of the Rhine. These pockets are gradually enlarged on the 13th of May, but crossing the river still proves a difficult ordeal, as German artillery fights a masterful campaign, dodging Allied air attacks while maintaining fire on the river. As German command elements regain control of their forces, the reserve of Thor and Zeus Panzermechs again prove decisive. Delivered where they are needed through the heroics of the Luftwaffe, the Panzermechs dislodge foothold after foothold along the river. By the 15th of May, the British are back on their side of the Rhine. Their chance of seizing the initiative and gaining ground in the race with the U.S. is lost. August 1946. The Germans are now exhausted in a desperate gamble. They launch a series of small but well-resourced raids across the Rhine and into the Allied rear. Under the command of Colonel Otto Skorzeny, these raids are an attempt to delay Allied reorganization efforts long enough for the Wehrmacht to regroup and rearm. The stories of these raids become legend in both Germany and around the world. Small team of commandos, often in Allied uniforms, would conduct outrageous attacks against Allied headquarters, logistic hubs, and supply routes. The German press dubbed the period the Summer of Heroes, likening the commandos to Greek and Roman warriors of legend. Skorzeny became the nemesis of the Allies. General Patton goes so far as to assemble a special task force just to hunt him down. October 1946. As both sides emerge from the summer of fighting across the Rhine, it is Germany that seizes the initiative and attacks suddenly on 3 fronts to grab beachheads on the Allied side of the Rhine. Specifically prepared Thor Panzermechs wade across the Rhine to the shock of the Allied defenders and circumnavigate the prepared defenses to send the Allied defenders reeling backwards from the river. 3 weeks of heavy fighting see the Germans gain control and secure a decisive bridgehead across the Rhine. An armored attack from this bridgehead pushes the British north and west into Belgium. German momentum then begins to fail, partly due to lengthening supply lines, but also due to the increasingly bad weather. November 1946. With Europe suffering the worst winter in memory, military activity slows to a crawl. Air operations struggle to have any impact, and the Germans take advantage of the weather to consolidate their positions. At night, German and American super soldiers conduct their own war within a war. All sides use the respite to develop increasingly sophisticated weaponry and restore the fighting strength of their forces. February 1947. With the Western European theater gripped in the most severe winter in living memory, the first months of the year are a period of rearmament and reorganization for both sides. Germany, with renewed morale after the victories of 1946, uses this time to refit its tired and battered units with the latest vehicles and equipment. Ammunition and a new synthetic fuel arrive at the frontline units in unprecedented quantities, and German commanders take the chance to train and drill their newest recruits and conscripts. Likewise, the Allies move vast amounts of resources across from the Normandy beach and the heavy ports in Antwerp and Amsterdam. The industrial might of the United States is going to be a decisive factor in the fighting to come. Part of this industry is focused on the rearmament of the French army. General de Gaulle's triumphant return to Paris in November of 1944 was followed with a rapid call to arms, and the French population responded. Although eager to exact their revenge on their former occupiers, the French army is prepared carefully through 1946, with a focus on training and quality over quantity. Equipped along the U.S. lines, the French army is poised to field 4 corps of heavily equipped and highly trained forces at the start of 1947. Larger infantry formations provide rear area security across France. The U.S., having already equipped the 1st French Army, begins adding heavy armored infantry and M8 Grizzly Walkers to the French order of battle. A similar story is unfolding in Italy, where the Royalist Italian forces of southern Italy are keen to prove their value to the Allied cause and are equipped from the industrial stockpiles of the United States. The Allies remain cautious of the Italians' will to fight their fellow countrymen, and although well equipped with conventional vehicles and weapons, Italian access to Rift-Tech weaponry is limited. Despite this impressive display of industrial might, at night, German Rift-Tech monstrosities continue to raid Allied lines, ensuring units never get a chance to fully relax on the front lines. To counter this, the enhanced soldiers of the U.S. Paragon program often set traps for the Schreckwolfen and the Nachtjäger and achieve a high success rate, but the Paragons can't be everywhere, and the average Allied soldier spends the night watchful and fearful. Although the weather prevents the easy movement of forces, the U.S. pushes its new Rift-Tech formations to forward staging posts in anticipation of a spring offensive. Brigade formations of heavy armored infantry supported by Pershing and Tesla-armed tanks prepare to throw the Germans back across the Rhine. However, their preparations are matched by Germany. Shock brigades of fanatical SS troops are being made ready to storm out of the beachheads to try and repeat the blitzkrieg tactics of 7 years earlier. March 1947. As the worst of the weather begins to break, the lull in the fighting rapidly comes to an end. Looking to seize the initiative, the combined French and U.S. 7th Army under General Patch pushes forward at Karlsruhe. The objective is to crush the German beachhead on the west bank of the Rhine and open a gap in the German defenses to the south on the main Allied effort further north. Starting on the 13th of March and acting within the spirit of Eisenhower's intent, but before the British and other American forces were coordinated, Patch takes a huge gamble that almost pays off. Striking the prepared German defenses hard, the 7th Army succeeds in penetrating deep into the beachhead, but at tremendous cost. German reinforcements slow the U.S. advance and then bring it to a halt. On the 22nd of March, French forces attempt to rebuild the momentum with a thrust northwards to Mannheim, and after initial success, they stall well short of their objective. Even so, the German defensive line has been penetrated, and the Allies have caused enough damage that any German plans to advance in this sector have been thwarted. However, 7th Army now has Germans to its front and flanks, and the decision has been made whether to withdraw or prepare to defend the territory. To Patch, that decision is simple: hold and reinforce the breach. His efforts to convince Eisenhower to provide more resources are echoed by de Gaulle, keen to see the French flag at the forefront of this renewed offensive. Elsewhere, the Allies are more cautious, and initial probes in the British and Canadian sectors reveal strong defensive positions with few signs of weakness. Reluctant to commit forces without clear objectives, the activity in the northern sectors of the front are characterized by a series of raids and reconnaissance in-force operations. On the 19th of March, the British used their new Meteor rockets for the first time, with the 5th Royal Tank Regiment's newly issued Churchills attempting to punch through the German strongpoint as a test of this new Rift-Tech weapon. Results are good, but a more concentrated effort is going to be required to create a breakthrough. In the center, the U.S. 3rd Army under General Patton conducts similar operations, and likewise, finds little evidence of a weakness to exploit. With Patch calling for reinforcements for the 7th Army, General Bradley opts to continue with raids and probes in the north, confident that an opportunity will reveal itself. On the Gustav line in Italy, the improving weather gives each side the opportunity to determine the other's intent. It is rapidly clear to the Germans and Italians defending the fortifications across the center of the country that the Allies are in little better shape to attack than they were before the winter lull. Whilst a boost to the defenders' morale, the knowledge is of little military use, as the Axis forces are well dug in and prepared and see no reason to risk defeat by going on an offensive. One battle of note, on the 9th of March north of the Sangro River, sees 2 units of Italian troops encounter each other in simultaneous reconnaissance operations. Perhaps as neither force wants to seem weak in front of their allies, the meeting engagement leads to significant commitment of additional forces. After several full days of fighting, both sides withdraw, having fought fiercely and acquitted themselves well. Allied and Axis concerns over the reliability of their own Italian allies are allayed, at least for the time being. April 1947. With initial efforts to gain the initiative less effective than desired, Eisenhower orders twin offensive efforts in the north and the south. In the north, Montgomery is tasked with forcing a path to the Rhine and beyond to target Germany's industrial facilities in the region. Under orders, the Canadian 1st Army crosses the start line first and pushes hard for the Rhine. Gradual progress is made, but the German defenses prove costly to assault and dangerous to bypass. By the start of May, the Rhine seems in reach, but the majority of the 1st Army's combat power is spent. With the offensive stalling, Montgomery orders Dempsey's British 2nd Army into the fight to attempt to secure the gains made by the Canadians. However, confusion during this forward passage of lines loses the Allies' precious time, allowing the German forces the opportunity to launch Operation Trident, the offensive they had been preparing for during the winter months. Crossing the Dutch-German border on a narrow front between Roermond and Venlo, the lead element of Army Group B punched deep into Dempsey's weakened lines. With the 5th Panzer Army leading the German advance, they make rapid progress against thinly spread British forces. Their objective is the Dutch port of Antwerp, with the secondary objectives of Brussels and Rotterdam, which is critical to the flow of Allied raw material into Europe. At the end of May, the Germans are fighting for Eindhoven in a combined Panzer and Fallschirmjäger assault. Bitter fighting between British and German forces rages from street to street. The pinnacle of German Rift-Tech equipment is fielded to maximize every advantage, from the heavily armored grenadiers to the Panzermechs to the Schreckwaffens to the Nachtjäger skirmishers terrorizing the night. With forward elements further north fatigued by their attempted assault, Dempsey's 1st Army is in disarray, and the Canadian 1st Army is rapidly thrown in the fight to stall the German advance. Patch's 7th Army is locked in combat with the German 1st Army in the vicinity of Karlsruhe. Using the Black Forest to the south, the Germans are able to raid and harass the flanks of Patch's forces. As the French 2nd Corps prepare to push north in response, it is surprised by a German offensive directed by Himmler himself. In an attempt to cut off large parts of the 7th Army, Himmler strikes west and threatens to cut deep into the rear of Patch's forces. This is followed by frantic efforts to stall the German advance by both US and French forces, many of whom are badly mauled as they enter the combat zone in piecemeal fashion. In Italy, after a series of probes to confirm the solidity of the Gustav line, Allied commanders face an experienced opponent in Field Marshal Kesselring, and he is not about to surrender his superior position easily. The US 5th Army makes its first attempt to breach the German and Italian defenses, but have little appetite for the casualties inflicted upon them by the well-positioned and well-trained Axis forces. With little direction forthcoming from both high commands, the Allied and Axis forces in Italy are content to dig in and watch each other carefully across no man's land. It is now June 1947, and the war in Western Europe rages on.